Welcome to another exciting episode of This Week in Space. I'm your host with the most, Joan Emerson Bell. I'm an astrologer and mental health counselor, tarot reader, all around weirdo. And I like to show up every Monday at like 11-ish Mountain Time to break down what's going on in these celestial spheres. Yeah, and uh, someone's saying ready for the Astro tea, and you know what? I'm about to spill it. So sit down, relax, let your wizard do the driving. We've got kind of a light week in space, but for some reason, I took a lot of notes on it. So yeah, we're gonna lock in and break down all the astro weather that you need to know to help you navigate this week in space with a little style, a little grace, some elegance, and a savoir-faire. You know what I'm saying? Before we jump into the astro weather, I want to let folks know that I am going to be co-facilitating a retreat in Epidavros, Greece, from September 20th to September 27th, right in time for the autumnal equinox. We'll be talking about dreams and sacred waters. We're going to be going to a bunch of like sacred springs and sites that were sacred to Hera. We'll be doing a lot of dream work, a lot of magic. I'll be talking about the water signs in the astrological chart. I'm going to be co-facilitating this with Sarah Janes, who is a author and mythologist and dream worker, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you all can join us. I think that there are a couple spots left. You can check out the website, themysteries.org, and go to the retreats tab. Again, that's themysteries.org, and look up the Dreaming Waters retreat. And I'll put a link in the show notes. There's a link in my bio on Instagram if you all want to check that out. And yeah, I hope to see you in Greece for the autumn equinox. The other thing that I want to say, I have a Patreon, which is a great way to support me if you choose to. I've been kind of slacking on my Patreon contributions, and I apologize for that. One of the things that I put up there is a weekly astrology themed radio show called the Melee Report, which is on a bit of a hiatus because I'm studying for my national counseling exam, which I'm taking tomorrow. So, I wanted to first say sorry for slacking off. Things got busy, and I had to read, hold on, this entire book, which was a lot. Anyway, the other thing that I want to say is, yeah, pray for your wizard tomorrow, 12:30 Mountain Time. I'm sitting for my license exam, and I'm a little freaked out. Oh, thank you so much. I'm a little freaked out by it. It's gonna be fine. But you know, it never hurts to have folks sending you some good energy when you're going through an initiation. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, if you feel called to hook a wizard up, send me some good juju. All right, that is all the advertisements that I have. So let's jump into this week in space. We'll be looking at the week in space for July the 14th, which is today, 2025, through July the 20th of 2025. And we start off kind of on a light foot as we're all integrating the Saturn retrograde and the pressure of the Saturn Neptune conjunction, which is about 13 minutes apart, which is pretty dang close, good enough for union work, as they say. That conjunction won't perfect until February 20th of 2026, because Saturn just stationed retrograde over the weekend, and will be moving back into Pisces, followed by Neptune. And then they will finally come together at 0 degrees of Aries on February the 20th. But I don't know, it's fraught. It's intense. There's a lot of energy with the Saturn Neptune conjunction about systems dissolving, which I think we are getting to witness, and things melting down, old structures being washed away. Good morning, Gina Maria. Nice to see you. So like old structures being washed away, which like can be great and that can be revitalizing, but the actual like going through it, can be really challenging. And, you know, last week we saw a lot of flooding in Texas and Rio kind of floods all over the place, which is a Neptunian theme, kind of washing away infrastructure, not having the infrastructure to support systems that then become washed away and we have to rebuild them. And again, the rebuilding process can be awesome if we do it skillfully, but the washing away can be really challenging and dysregulating. Also, Saturn stationing retrograde over the weekend and kind of grinding to a halt within 13 minutes of the Neptune conjunction, and really causing us to rethink and review and reconsider the structures that we are building and what we are dedicating to, how we are spending our time, what we want to make real. And, you know, the sort of shifts of the outer planets, although they spend about half the year, and I'm including Saturn in that as the furthest most in the kind of like, you know, planetary sphere that we are able to see with our naked eyes, and then the outer planets, Neptune, Uranus, or Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Beyond that, you know, Saturn grinding to a halt has an impact, right? Because they post up at this 1 degree, and we feel this sort of vibe shift, which can be a little challenging. And when Saturn stations direct or retrograde, it feels like there's like kind of an increase of pressure, which can be a little destabilizing, hard to hold, hard to navigate, hard to know what to do with. And so, all this to say, if you feel like you've been melting down, or people around you have been melting down, or the world is melting down, it's right on schedule. This is what was foretold in the prophecy, my friends, and it's okay, right? And one of the reasons that I like to do this is it helps us to kind of navigate these changes, these shifts, these vicissitudes. It gives us context so we can really decide how we want to show up and what we are being asked of, what is being asked of us from the archetypes, right? From these like planetary energies that are just doing their thing. And as they do their thing, they kind of pull us along. And when we recognize, okay, like Saturn is looking for dedication, Saturn is looking for commitment, Saturn is looking to build structure, Saturn rules time. You know, how do I like manage my time? How do I show up in for the things that I really care about, that I want to create over the long term? Right. I think when we can consider that, it helps us to navigate the sort of melting down with skill, or a little bit more skill, or as much skill as we can muster in the moment. And, you know, it's skill takes work, skill takes energy, and it can be draining, right? So we also have to find ways of supporting ourselves as we are going through rapidly shifting and kind of uncomfortable times. The other thing that I want to say, and I don't know how other people feel about this, but like with the sort of Saturn Neptune conjunction approaching that like max point, time has felt really weird. Time feels like it's dissolving or getting like real wiggly or slippery in all of these ways. And, you know, again, that's just something to be with and to notice, right? And, you know, how do we create structures of time that work for us when it feels like time is like a Dali painting and it's just melting clocks everywhere? The other thing to just add into this mix is Uranus entered into Gemini on the 7th, which, you know, creates new energy, like this sort of Uranian shift. And Uranus deals with like sudden insight, breakdown, breakthrough, revolution, liberation. And when it shifts signs, like there is definitely a vibe shift. And I've been feeling that this past week. You know, this sort of like frenetic energy. There's like a lot of information coming in, needing like, how do we process, how do we hold this information, how do we hold what's right for me and what's being asked of me from other people, right? How do we maintain authenticity in this sort of wild sea that we are swimming in? And also, you know, Gemini is a sign of, you know, day and night, left and right, black and white, right? This sort of like binary system. And Uranus is really trying to break down this binary thinking or binary way of being, and like liberating us from a this or that. And, you know, we live in a dual world, right? We live in a world of duality. And so there is the construct of that. And then what are the ways that we can sort of shift that or break through that or change that in order to feel a little bit more free and a little bit more in line with our authentic self? You know, anyway, also just sort of along these lines, just as soon as Uranus moved into Gemini. And Gemini, has a lot to do with like splitting and separating and like spreading things out, and moving between the poles. But as soon as Uranus moved into Gemini, there was like a MAGA meltdown around the Epstein files. And, there's splitting that is occurring there. And I imagine that there's going to be a lot more splitting in our world over the next 7 years, for better or for worse. And, I think that this was sort of prepared by Jupiter's journey through Gemini, which like increased sort of rifts, right? And increased the movement towards poles. And then Uranus is in there and just blows it up, right? And whatever rifts were sort of spread out or made bigger by Jupiter's movement through Gemini, Uranus comes in, throws a lightning bolt, and like blows that situation right up. Anyway, getting into what's actually happening this week, that's sort of just our foundational context. On Thursday, July the 17th, Mercury, the messenger, will be stationing in Gatorade at 15 degrees, 34 arc minutes of the fixed fire sign of Leo. And so here are some of Mercury's retrograde dates in Leo so that you can just be aware. So they entered their shadow on June the 29th at 4 degrees and 14 minutes of Leo. And then they station retrograde on what is it, Thursday, July the 17th, at 15 degrees and 34 arc minutes of Leo. They will make their cazimi, which is the conjunction with the sun, and they go into the heart of the sun on July the 31st at 9 degrees of Leo. And then Mercury will station direct on August the 11th at, again, 4 degrees and 14 minutes of Leo. And then they will finally leave their shadow August the 25th, at when they reach the 15-degree and 34 arc minute point in Leo. So that's just the sort of overview of some dates if you want to take notes on those or whatever. So Mercury deals with the ways that we process information, and it kind of makes sense of the world through language and other cognitive processes, right? They deal with issues connected to travel, technology, language, and exchange, right? Mercury is all about making connections. Mercury translates our sensory perceptions, the information that we're receiving from the world, auditory, sensory, visual, and they take these sensory perceptions and they translate them into concepts that are expressed through symbol and language, right? So during retrograde periods, we were asked to rethink, reconsider, redo, reimagine, revise, and rework the things in the mercurial areas of our lives. So this will be, through the area of Leo, and wherever we find Leo in our individual charts, the house that you have Leo in your birth chart, right? And also in the collective, in the sort of Leo archetype of life, right? And the flavor of this revision process and how it shows up in our lives tends to be related, right, to the sign in the house in our personal charts where the retrograde is occurring. Right? Mercury retrogrades are not something to fear, my friends. Okay. Chris Warnock, who's a great astrological magician, heard him lecture one time, and he was like, we used to have these malefic planets like Saturn, and then with modern astrology, like none of the planets are bad or good, right? They are just sort of these psychological impulses, which I think can be really helpful. But, all of the sort of fear that used to be located in Saturn and Mars and the malefics, now that they are not bad planets anymore, bad planets, right, has now been like, translated into Mercury's retrograde as this like thing to fear, right? Um, Scorpio 6 astrology is saying that their son's first day back to school is on the Kazemi. And I think that's really awesome, right? Because the Kazemi is this moment of like insight, right? Where things kind of click or we get new information that comes in, which I think is a great day to start school, even though I think that's way too early, right? So Mercury retrograde's not something to fear, my friends, right? They are opportunities to slow down and rethink what we are doing and why. And this is incredibly important so we don't just like run off a cliff because the road is clear, right? Oftentimes, the rethinking is prompted by disruptions to areas of life controlled by Mercury that we, have become accustomed to these areas running really smoothly. right? Like travel or communication or technology, et cetera, et cetera. So these slowdowns and disruptions kind of provide some breaks in the flow, and they frustrate our conscious process, right? Kind of like a Zen koan, right? Which causes us to pause and consider, right, the nature of reality and whether a tree falling in the forest actually does make a sound or not, right? And so this kind of creates a glitch out for the conscious mind and causes us to re-examine what we think we know and why, right? That glitch space, right? That slowdown, that break from the flow provides this opening and an opportunity for our unconscious mind to come online and to kind of integrate some of the conscious and unconscious materials, right? Mercury, again, moves between the worlds, between the upper world of the Olympians and the underworld of Hades, right? Of the underworld, of the unconscious, of the somatic, right? And these are areas that we might not have been able to access, right? And we might not have been able to receive that valuable information if things are just humming along at normal speed and everything's going according to plan, right? Mercury's retrograde provides us with the opportunity to process issues which have kind of lain dormant in our psyches during the time that Mercury has been direct, and we're just going about our lives, sending our emails, going to the store, traveling, having conversations, blah, 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 right? And when things run smoothly, we don't really have any reason to sit down and think about what am I doing, right? But when you miss your bus and you're stuck at a Greyhound station for 4 hours, right, it gives you a real opportunity to think about what you're doing with your life, why you're taking a Greyhound in the first place, and what's going on, right? So when things get messed up, we are really forced to slow down and think about what we are doing and why. And this is Mercury's major role during the retrograde, right? It's to help us to access the wisdom of the unconscious and to integrate that wisdom into our lives. So the retrogrades are opportunities to slow down and turn our attention inward and to allow the space for information to arise from this unconscious place, from the unconscious mind, right? And then to take the time to integrate the ideas and images that spontaneously arise when we take the time to shift our awareness and be present and be like fully present in our Greyhound station, right? So, um, in our fast-paced modern world, it can feel really challenging to create the space to turn inward and to allow things to slow down, or for to allow this space even for plans to be disrupted. However, slowing down and tuning in can be a really revolutionary act because they can help us to break old patterns and allow us to come into a better alignment with our deeper knowing. So Mercury rules over thresholds and liminal spaces, right? The planet can only be seen at dusk and dawn, which are the liminal times of day. Mercury retrogrades are times not only when we are rethinking, redoing, and reconsidering, but these are spaces where things are not fully formed and we don't really have enough information to make informed decisions. And this is why people are advised not to make expensive purchases or sign contracts during this retrograde or during a retrograde, I should say, because during the Mercury's retrograde, we might not know what we think we know, and we don't want to commit to things and have new information come to light and cause us to change our minds or need to back out of things that we've already signed or committed to, which are challenging to back out of. That being said, you got to live your life, right? And if you need to like sign a contract, if you need to book a flight, if you need to go and do something, like you got to do it, right? But just like leave space around it for things to change, for things not to go according to plan. And, if we can be aware of that and flights get delayed or people back out of contracts or things don't work the way that we think they're going to, it doesn't become super destabilizing because we have the awareness that, okay, this might happen, right? So let's talk about Mercury's retrograde through Leo. This year, Mercury is retrograde predominantly in fire signs with retrograde movement back into the water signs. However, Mercury's retrograde in Leo is the only retrograde that occurs entirely in fire signs this year. Leo is a fixed fire sign, and this seems kind of fitting that it should be holding down Mercury's retrograde through the fire energy, right? And fire signs deal with our telos, right? Our vision, the mission, the thing that pulls us or draws us into action, is the image in the mind's eye which inspires us and which fires us up. With Mercury's retrograde in fire, we are reconsidering and revising that vision, that quest, that image that compels us and motivates us. We can ask ourselves, what am I fired up about and why? What burns brightest inside me? And how am I able to feed and tend that vision? And what am I striving for and why? With Mercury's retrograde in the fixed fire sign of Leo, here are some themes that might come up for us individually and collectively, right? Reconsidering the spotlight. How are we being seen and what are we being seen for, right? How comfortable do we feel with our level of visibility? Are there things that we want to shift or adjust so that we can be more visible? Or do we feel too exposed? Do we need to step back? Or are we asked to step forward in some way? Where do we feel that resistance, right? And where is our growth edge around our visibility? Mercury's retrograde through Leo is also kind of rekindling play and creativity, right? So Mercury's retrograde through fire, right, is about reconnecting us with the spark of life. And one of the ways that we can find that spark is through creativity, and it can be kindled through play, right? One of Leo's significations is self-expression. Leo is concerned with expressing our authentic self, right, and being seen for that. With the Mercury retrograde through Leo, we are rethinking if the ways we are expressing ourselves are actually in right alignment with who we truly are. And if not, this is an opportunity to kind of realign the ways that we express our authentic self. And again, like realigning self-expression is another theme, right? Thinking about what we are expressing and how we are expressing ourselves. What inner vision am I trying to share and how can I best communicate that to the world? Are there things that we are doing? Are the things that we are doing in alignment with who we really are and who we really want to be? Right? Also reviewing how we sustain the fire, right? Leo is a fixed fire sign. It is maintaining the fires that were started in Aries in the cardinal fire sign, which is sparking it up. So with the Mercury retrograde here, we are rethinking what fires we are tending and which irons we have in the fire, what things deserve our energy and what things may need to be abandoned for the time being. Right? And we can ask ourselves what sustains our fires and which fires are we choosing to sustain? One last thing to note is that Mercury and Leo may have a little bit of foot and mouth disease, right? Leo is like, oh my God, like, look at me, right? I want to say this thing. And with Mercury's retrograde here, there may be some bold statements made during the past couple of weeks or continuing to be made that need to be walked back or may need to be doubled down on. Leo is a fixed sign and is kind of stubborn, so folks may choose to take the double down option. And this is just something that we consider as we move into these summer months. And Wes Eddy is saying language and communication in the service of self. Exactly, right? And maybe even like rethinking our self-talk, right? How do we talk to ourselves? I know that I'm not always the kindest person to myself, right? But when that like authentic part comes up, how do we treat that, right? Do we tell it to like sit down and shut up, or do we say, okay, let me like create some space so that you can be heard? Right. So I think, yeah, thanks for bringing that in, Wes Eddy. Just the rethinking, reconsidering our self-talk and how we really can honor the authentic parts of ourself that want to emerge through the space of Leo. So moving right along. Friday, July the 18th, Mercury retrograde in Leo is gestation, right? Is standing still in space at 15 degrees and 34 arc minutes of Leo, and coming into a supportive sextile to Venus in Gemini, which happens to be a Mercury ruled sign, right? So this happens the day after Mercury stations retrograde. Mercury has just stopped in space and is posted up at this 15-degree of Leo mark. The sextile to Venus is the first aspect that they are making once they station. This seems kind of auspicious to me, right? Mercury is kind of a chameleon and they take on the characteristics of the planets that they are hanging out with. And as Mercury stops their forward motion, they are graced by Venus, the planet of love and beauty, who's currently moving through Mercury's sign of Gemini. So Mercury is what's called the dispositor of Venus, as Venus is in Gemini, right? Which is sort of like the landlord. Venus is hanging out in Mercury's land or house, right? And so Mercury has a lot of power to resource Venus, right? At least until August 6th, when Venus enters into Capricorn, which is like 5 days before Mercury stations direct. Right, so this supportive sextile helps Venus and Mercury to kind of develop communication with each other, right? About like how's it going, right? What's going to happen? And this feels kind of important because as Mercury begins their retrograde journey from now until August the 11th, it's going to impact how Venus functions and behaves in Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. The dispositor of a planet, right, which would be Mercury in this case, um, being the sort of ruler of Venus and Gemini, right? And so Mercury is able to provide a planet with the resources that they need to be able to operate skillfully and with ease, right? So the planet who rules the sign has all the resources that they're able to like give and provide to another planet moving through there, right? So for example, if you go and stay at somebody's house and you need to do some work, right, and you don't have the Wi-Fi password, it makes things difficult, and you have to call the person who owns the house or whatever is renting it and be like, "Yo, can I have the Wi-Fi?" And they resource you with the Wi-Fi password, right? And so this is how planets function. If Venus needs something in Gemini, they sort of got to get it through Mercury. Right. And as Mercury moves backwards through Leo, they may have their hands full rethinking situations, reviewing communication, retracting bold statements, and generally retracing their steps since they entered their shadow back on Sunday, June the 29th. Right. So Mercury's retrograde is going to have an impact on how Venus is able to get their needs met in the Mercury ruled sign of Gemini. Right, this is a mutable air sign where Venus becomes interested in multiplicity, novelty, variety, as well as communication and the sharing of information. Right, and while Mercury moves retrograde, those aspects of communication and information sharing may be impacted, as well as we may find some new challenges or spaces of disconnect around our desire and access to variety and novelty. Right? This isn't necessarily a bad thing. We may just need to practice staying present and really like work on our ability to listen and communicate in order to clear up misunderstandings, right? And so this is misunderstandings and miscommunication are a Mercury retrograde thing, but they're going to impact the Venus areas of our life as well because Venus is moving through a Mercury ruled sign. You kind of get what I'm getting at, right? So this also might be an opportunity to come into a better awareness of what our needs are when it comes to areas of relationship, joy, connection, beauty, right? It might cause us to pay more attention to our value system, which Venus is all about. We might be presented with situations where we need to reconnect in with our core values in order to live in integrity and to show up with authenticity. There's a lot of information options flying around in Gemini, and with Mercury's retrograde, this might even confuse things even more, right? Gemini is about being able to hold multiple things simultaneously, multiple points of view, multiple conversations, multiple opinions. It's about opening things up and spreading things out so we can understand how they work, right? However, that can get pretty overwhelming. And ideally, we have the sense of what we are looking for in all of that unpacking so we're not constantly just like separating and spreading and like taking on more variety or more information, right? We want to find a point that we can orient to and coagulate around, right? And Venus can help provide that awareness through desire or joy or pleasure, right? And especially through our value system, what we like and what we don't like. During the time when Venus is being ruled by a retrograde Mercury, we get the chance to review the information that we are receiving about connection and relationship and our experience of pleasure, right? And we get to weigh these against our core values to really decide what feels right for us and what feels in alignment. We may notice that others have a gang of opinions about the choices that we are making, right? And again, we need to find ways of tapping into our value system to decide how much weight we give others' opinions and ideas. And we can, in some cases, we probably should allow that feedback to help us grow in the ways that we show up in the world. right? But also we need to decide, is this right for me, or is this, somebody else's thing that they're trying to put on me, right? Gemini is about blending the internal with the external, the self with the other, the light with the dark, in order to find that secret third thing. Right? It's about the binary as much as it's about the hybrid that's created when we learn to hold both things, right? And the space in between that, the poles of the binary. And this is a period, and this period is a chance to allow ourselves to evolve through that process as we are really reconsidering the poles, right? Or the different viewpoints or places that we are asked to hold. And and uh and as we like learn to hold multiple things at a time, it can open up more space in ourselves to transcend that kind of binary setup. And again, this will unfold in part through the review and reframe and revisiting that is initiated by Mercury's retrograde. So let's actually look at this transit real quick. And like I said, this is a sweet and supportive aspect between the planet of communication, Mercury, and the planet of relationships, Venus. The sextile is an aspect which is related to Venus. There is support there, but we got to kind of do something to access it. It's maybe as simple as just allowing the space for the information to reveal itself. However, this also may create a little bit of ease today, right? So we can make the most use of this easeful feeling or this transit by engaging in communication that feels beautiful, right? Hanging out with friends, creative writing, making art, looking at art or places of beauty, because taking in beauty is a way of gathering and engaging with Venusian information, right? And taking in and communicating joy and beauty can A, be a really good way to show up for Mercury as they station retrograde, and B, a great way to resource yourself in these trying and turbulent times, right? Let's be real, right? It's pretty whack out there. There's a lot of chaos and a lot of fear and intensity unfolding on a regular basis. And taking time to fill your cup through good conversation, supportive interaction, and the experience of beauty where you can find it can be incredibly resourcing. So we're not just grinding on empty all the time. You know what I'm saying? And along these lines, tapping into feelings of love and friendship and supportive connection can be incredibly valuable right now. In the midst of all this chaos, being able to tap into the people or animals or places that feel good and who you feel have your back can be really helpful. And this may be a great day to just call or text those that you care about, especially if they pop into your mind. Just let them know that you care and you're there for them in whatever capacity feels good for you, right? And it feels really good to receive communication like that, right? Like, hey, I'm just thinking about you. I love you. I really care about you. I think you're doing a great job, right? And it can really help sustain those we love through difficult times, right? Just by like dropping a text to somebody that you're thinking about or that you care about. And also try and take the time to soak up the love and beauty that is available for you in your life. And if you're not feeling it on this day, don't worry. Just take it in as much as it feels comfortable for you. And just like see if you can like dip a toe in the love and the beauty that is there for you. And this is a great way of being able to fill our cup and, to help sustain us through challenging times. And who knows, practice this, check it out, and you might even thank me for this advice later. So, moving right along, Saturday, July the 19th. We have the sun in Cancer square, Chiron in Aries. This is going down at 27 degrees and 6 arc minutes of these cardinal signs. So the sun is our sense of self, right? It is our personal sovereignty. It is our unique individual way of showing up in the world. It is beautiful. It is life-giving. It's what feels most authentic to us. It's what we aspire towards. The sun represents that inner light that burns within each of us. And it is the ways that we find to shine that light into the world. Chiron, on the other hand, squaring the sun, right, is our core wound that we carry with us through this life. It is the experience of this wound and our work to heal it that helps us to grow as individuals and helps us to grow into our power and our vocation. But it hurts and it sucks, right? And a square is a tense aspect where two planets are at cross purposes, right? There's all this tension there. The square seeks integration, which ultimately can be helpful, but is like really challenging to sit with that tension in order to achieve the synthesis that it's asking for. So, my friends, we have the sun, this authentic, unique part of ourselves moving through Cancer, a sign associated with home and family and belonging, coming into this hard aspect with Chiron and our core wounding. Can you see where this is going? Right? This transit can bring up issues from our family of origin, how we were seen or not seen when we were growing up. How did our families accept or reject certain parts of us? We learn connection through behavior, right? And we are rewarded with love and care and affection for behaviors which are deemed acceptable by our caregivers. Behaviors or ways of being that were not valued by our caregivers can be shamed or rejected or not acknowledged. This causes people to suppress these parts of ourselves, right, that were not appreciated or valued by our family of origin, right? And or like the communities that we came up in, right? And we can expand this outside of family of origin, and think about like being in school, right, in grade school, and what was accepted and what was valued and what allowed you to fit in and what you were like teased for or shamed for, right? With this square from the sun to Chiron, we may notice some activation around these parts of ourselves or our identity that weren't valued by our family or friends or others. Right? And these suppressed parts can kind of fester and seek expression and validation in various ways. With this transit, it might call up some of these sort of unhealed wounds, right? Or these activated places around belonging, right? Around like, oh, if I'm authentic, or if I am myself, then I'm going to be rejected, right? Or it may bring up some of the grief and pain associated with needing to hide our light or reject parts of ourselves in order to survive, right? The sun just wants to shine its light. That's what it does, right? And I think that that's sort of a internal calling that we all have, right? This is me, right? Love me, right? Look at me, love me, right? And if that light was shamed or we were made to feel bad about being too bright or too much or taking up too much space when we were young, right? We may have learned to dim that light in order to belong, to fit in and to survive. Cancer has a lot to do with belonging, right? It's ruled by the moon. And when we are young, the need to belong causes us to contort in order to fit in and be accepted, right? And we learn these patterns. Oh, like if I'm like this, then people like me. But if I'm myself, then no one's going to like me. So I just push that authentic part away so that I can come into the life-giving connection of acceptance, right? And this creates wounding as we abandon parts of ourselves. This wound may be resurfacing during this transit as we're faced with the difficult equation of needing to be authentic and in alignment with our true selves, and the desire to belong and feel safe and to receive love. That tension between authenticity and belonging is incredibly challenging. Right. And so this transit may ask us how much of ourselves are we willing to sacrifice or ignore in order to receive love? Right. And also, like, do we really need to do that? Right. And this question can be really painful because we may find ourselves operating out of a place of scarcity or a story that if we are not able to belong here or receive love from this person or that person, then there's nothing else out there for us, right? This is a story of scarcity. The need for connection can be so strong that it blinds us to the reality that there is no scarcity of connection, right? We live in an interconnected world, right? That is formed through connection. Like gravity is connection, right? Your feet on the floor, your body in the chair, the weight of your body. This is connection, right? And this is a fundamental principle of life on Earth. And we can ask ourselves what it would be like if we could be loved for who we truly are, right? Without needing to dim or diminish our light. And so I just want to bring in the myth of Chiron real quick because it has an interesting connection to the sign of Cancer, right? The story of Cancer, or the constellation of the crab Cancer, right, comes from Hercules' battle with the Hydra, which is his second labor. And Hera sends a crab to try and distract him so that he will be killed by the Hydra, right? So a little backstory, right? Hera hates Hercules because he's the product of one of Zeus's many infidelities. And then Zeus has the audacity to name Hercules, to give him the name Hercules, which means Hera's glory, which kind of adds insult to injury. And then Zeus also tricks Hera into breastfeeding Hercules, kind of preying on Hera's maternal qualities by saying, "Oh, like look at this little baby. He's an orphan. Like he's gonna starve to death. Will you breastfeed him?" Right? And so Hera begins breastfeeding him, and she finds out that she's been tricked, and she's repulsed and throws Hercules away. And they say that the Milky Way was created by the milk that shot out of her breast when she chucked Hercules away. Anyway, right, she hates this dude and vows to destroy him, and she like works really hard at it. Anyway, back to the Hydra, right? Hercules is battling the many-headed Hydra with the poison breath and the poison blood. So Hera creates this crab that she sends to bite Hercules on his ankle in order to distract him so the Hydra will kill him. However, Hercules, big kind of lumbering hero that he is, just steps on the crab, right, and kills it. So Hera honors the crab for their service, picks them up and places them into the heavens as the constellation of Cancer. Hercules, after defeating the Hydra, dips some of his arrows in the poison blood of this monster. Later, he goes on to accidentally shoot Chiron with one of these toxic Hydra-blooded tipped arrows, which gives Chiron his second incurable wound. So, we have this story of rejection. Hercules being a representation of infidelity to Hera, who rejects him and seeks to destroy him, right? And one of her plots to kill him brings in the crab of Cancer, which is a sign that deals with home and family, fidelity, which are things that are sacred to Hera. However, Hercules is unfazed by this attack, right? He does, and through this process, right, he ends up dipping his arrows in the Hydra poison and giving Chiron an incurable wound with the poison extracted through this experience. Right? And it's interesting to think about the poison-tipped arrow in relation to Chiron and the core wound. Right? The Hydra poison has no cure, but Chiron cannot die. And we can think about the poison arrows that we may have been struck with, specifically through family of origin or the experience of feeling a sense of belonging or connection to home or a lack thereof, right? Maybe there are things that a caregiver or parent or, friend or teacher said that struck us and continue to fester. Right. This can be stories or curses, right? Like you'll never amount to anything, or they may have given us the sense that nothing we did was good enough, or that we were unlovable or only deserving of love if we did or didn't do something, right? And these are like poison arrows that stick us and continue to sting and fester even into our adult lives. They poison other relationships as well as our sense of self, right? Stories begin to form around these wounds to protect us that then become kind of calloused and internalized. And so, as the sun squares Chiron, it provides us an opportunity to examine these old wounds and to work to heal them. And this may involve shifting the story or just being able to be present with the feeling that's attached to them in order to clean them out and to begin the healing process. Right? And in this story, we also have Hercules, who is a solar heroic figure, and the sun is a heroic archetype. And this may call us to be brave enough to be present with the challenging feelings that are activated by this square, and to have the courage to lean into our authentic selves, even though even though there may be wounds associated with us being who we truly are. Right? With the sun in Cancer, there's also an element of care that we are called into. How do we show up as a hero who is capable of caring for the wounded and more fragile parts of ourselves instead of replicating old patterns of rejecting or ignoring or suppressing the things that are too much or too messy? Right? We don't want to replicate the wounds that caregivers or early relationships inflicted upon us by treating our inner children in the same way, right? It's heroic to be able to show up for those vulnerable parts of ourselves and to treat them in a way that we needed to be treated when we were young and didn't have the same power. Right? This also moves outwards from our internal system. right, into our communities? How can we show up with the courage to care for the most vulnerable among us instead of trying to outsource our pain onto the people around us or projecting our unhealed wounds onto friends, partners, neighbors, people in our communities, people who look or speak differently from us? The square gives us a chance to notice those places of activation in ourselves, and it asks us to be brave enough to care for those vulnerable parts of ourselves as well as for the vulnerable people in our world. And this is truly heroic, my friends. And it's how we begin to heal the hydra poison that has been coursing through our veins for years and even generations. And in doing this, we are able to step into a new sense of power, which in turn can empower others to engage in their own healing process. And this is a way that change can happen. Okay, so rounding us out, Sunday, July the 20th, right? We have Mars in Virgo, conjunct the South Node in Virgo, and this is occurring at 19 degrees and 38 arc minutes. And so I don't usually talk about aspects to the nodes, but Sam Reynolds, great astrologer and a friend of mine, brought up some really interesting points on an Instagram reel that he did the other day about the Mars South Node conjunction. And I wasn't really going to talk about this, but a couple people sent me his post and I watched it and I was, kind of shifted some of my thinking. I'm going to speak about it in a different way. But Sam put a lot of emphasis on this transit. And he talked about historical events with Mars conjunction to the South Node, like the September 11th attack in 2001, the beginning of COVID in March of 2020, as well as the October 7th attack in 2023, which kind of kicked off Israel's bloodthirsty retaliation. I highly I don't want to like alarm anybody, about potential like danger or threat. And Sam like speaks very eloquently about this space and time, the history of it, and some ideas about like what this might bring about. And I highly recommend checking out his reel. I'll try and put it in my stories after this, because he's really smart and he makes some really good points and he's an excellent astrologer. Um, and he talks about how this Mars conjunct the South Node has had big impacts on the world in the past, right? And I just want to say, from my perspective, the current skies are different than 9/11 or March of 2020 because both times Mars was in Capricorn, where they were exalted, they had a lot of dignity. And during 9/11, we had Pluto-Saturn opposition, and during COVID, there was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And now Mars is in Virgo, where they don't have as much power, right? And Pluto isn't up in the mix. However, we are all up in the Saturn Neptune conjunction, and the world is honestly kind of a garbage fire at the moment. So, like, we'll see, right? Um, Cool Astrology by Moonlight is saying that they watched Sam's video the other day and it's really informative. And yeah, I highly recommend it. Also, like follow Sam Reynolds, SF Reynolds. Like that dude is great. He's brilliant. Um, and so just a heads up, even though there have been some difficult events that have occurred during Mars's conjunction with the South Node in the past, Mars conjoins the South Node about every 2 years. And just a quick note from a very cursory internet search that I did, the last time Mars was conjunct the South Node in Virgo was back on August 31st of 2006, and this occurred at 25 degrees and 28 arc minutes. And at that time, the International Astronomical Union voted to reclassify Pluto as a dwarf planet, and that occurred on August 24th, right? So if we have the South Node as a release point, right, like Pluto gets released or like cut away from like what's a planet, which I think is interesting. That's maybe a longer conversation for another time. And then on September 4th of 2006, Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, died from an injury caused by a stingray while filming an underwater documentary in the Great Barrier Reef. And wow, that is a Mars conjunct South Node thing right there, right? Again, South Node release point, and Mars is like penetrating, stabbing, cutting, and getting stung in the heart by a stingray and dying is pretty on brand for Mars conjunct the South Node. There are some other things, but I want to kind of move along because I have some other thing, like I have a different take on this, maybe less historical, more fairy tale oriented. However, I highly suggest you check out Sam's reel, and I'll try and post it in my stories. So let's get into it, my friends, and this may take a minute, so get comfortable. The South Node is a release point, like I was saying. It can be a space of grief and loss, which can be really painful. Yet, the experience of loss helps us to separate from our attachment to the illusion of samsara, right? Whereas the North Node is a place of increase, which pulls us deeper into the illusion of this reality, right? And it is a balance between the South Node and the North Node, right? Letting go and being pulled in, right? And that moving back and forth. And just so folks know, the North and South Node are not planets. They are shadow planets. They are the mathematical points where the eclipses occur, and they're like pretty potent, right? And so the South Node helps us to get in touch with what's most vital, right, through this experience of letting go of grief and loss. And it assists us in the process of surrender and acceptance. Mars is a blade, right? It's cutting. With Mars conjunct the South Node, it can help us to cut away the things that are not right for us. In Virgo, it assists us in cutting away everything that is extraneous or non-essential, right? And Virgo is about editing. It's about refining things to their most perfect expression. It's also about discerning through separating things out and editing them or removing their impurities. And so we can think about the South Node in Virgo as letting go of separation and categorization, as well as letting go of ideas of perfection or fixation on ideas of purity, which can become like incredibly problematic, right? Where Virgo is separating, Pisces, where the North Node is about integration and connection and unity, right? Virgo is a harvest sign, right? It occurs, in August and September, the time of the grain harvest, right? And it's symbolized by shafts of wheat. Virgo harvests the wheat and separates the wheat from the chaff, right? The inedible husk that holds the nutrient-rich grain. Virgo is about taking what is most beneficial and separating out what is not useful. And to harvest, we need to choose what to keep. And at the same time, we must let some things go or lay them to rest. What we harvest in Virgo can be held and stored in order to sustain us through the coming winter months. But we must choose wisely what we want to hold on to and what we choose to feed ourselves with. Because, as they say, you are what you eat. You know what I'm saying? So the opposite sign to Virgo is Pisces, where the North Node is currently transiting. Pisces is a sign that comes at the very end of winter, right? A time when the harvest has been exhausted, right? And our food stores have been used up. It's a time of hunger and fasting, right? And Lent occurs during Pisces season, right? Fasting brings us into closer contact with the spirit, because in the absence of food, we need to be nourished by the spirit. And I've heard it said that God recognizes all those that fast, right? And those who fast also recognize the divine. That experience of deprivation helps us to come into a deeper connection with the spirit and the relationship we have with the universe. Also, this deprivation is a place of hunger and starvation. And this is Rahu, the North Node's realm, right? Rahu, the Vedic name for the North Node, is a disembodied head who is always consuming, right? But they have no belly, so they never know that they're full, right? So they're just this experience of hunger that is like consuming and consuming and consuming and pulling us deeper into the illusion of samsara through what they consume, right? So we have these themes of letting go of old patterns, letting go of separation, as well as the insatiable hunger for unity, right? All of this being activated by Mars and Virgo conjunct the South Node, because Mars is a trigger point, right? When Mars connects with a planet or a place in space, it like activates it, right? To illustrate this, I'd like to talk about the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel, which is a German fairy tale from the Brothers Grimm. So in the story, there's a famine sweeping the land. And in this land, there is a family, a woodcutter and his wife and their two kids, Hansel and Gretel. And in some tellings, the wife is a wicked stepmother, because everybody loves a wicked stepmother in fairy tales, right? And so, in the midst of this famine, the family is running out of food. And the wife, wicked stepmother character, tells the husband that they don't have enough food to feed the entire family. She casually suggests that they just leave the kids in the woods to fend for themselves. All right, and says if they don't do this, they will all die of starvation. And if they just passively kill the children, then at least her and the husband will have a chance at survival. At first, the husband is against this idea, but eventually she persuades him. So Hansel and Gretel hear this conversation, and Hansel and they hear that the next day they're going to be let out in the woods and left there. And so Hansel gathers these white pebbles at night, and he stuffs his pockets full of them. The next day, the woodcutter and his wife bring the children out deep into the woods, saying that they need help gathering wood, right? And as they venture into the woods, Hansel leaves a trail of white stones behind them to mark the path back to the house. When they're far enough into the dark woods, the woodcutter and his wife make a fire for the children. They give them each a little piece of bread, and they tell them to wait right there. We'll be right back. Just going out for a pack of smokes. Just going out for a quart of milk. Be right back. Right. Then the woodcutter and his wife walk away, leaving the kids there. When the sun begins to set, Hansel and Gretel realize that this wasn't a joke, and they wait for the moon to rise, and then they follow the trail of white pebbles back home. The woodcutter and his wife are shocked that the kids made it home, and they give them a less than warm welcome. Oh, it's you. Oh, I'm glad to see you. Glad you made it home. Right. And life goes on. And soon the famine gets worse, and the wife convinces the husband again that they need to leave the kids in the woods, this time much deeper where the kids can't find their way back. The wife, who noticed the trail of white pebbles and is not about to let that happen again, locks them in their room that night, the night before they take them out. And in the morning, the woodcutter and his wife give the kids a little bit of bread and again lead them out into the dark woods. This time they bring him deeper and by a more circuitous route. Since Hansel was locked in his room, he couldn't gather the white pebbles to make his path this time. But clever kid that he is, he uses what he got and leaves a trail of breadcrumbs that mark their path, so him and his sister can once again find their way home. Again, the woodcutter and his wife build the children a fire and leave them sitting by it. After some time passes, and it dawns on the kids that their parents have really left them in the woods to die this time, and they're not coming back, and maybe they don't actually love them at all, they get up and try and follow the trail of breadcrumbs home. However, all the forest animals who are also starving, because everyone in this story is starving, have eaten all the breadcrumbs, and the kids have lost their way. Now, pause here. This is a very interesting Mars conjunct the South Node moment, right? The path back to home, right, has been cut off, right? The children are prevented from returning to the toxic environment in which they were living. This is a forced letting go or a forced separation. And part of the hunger of this story is the hunger for love and connection, not just food, right? And we may try and find, nourishment from places where it is not available, right? But we keep trying, right? And I've heard it said, don't go to the hardware store for milk because that's not going to work, right? But what we end up trying to do over and over again is get milk from the hardware store, right? And keep trying to get our emotional needs met and keep trying to get fed and nourished and satiated from places where it isn't available. And this is what Hansel and Gretel tried to do the last time their parents tried to abandon them and kill them in the woods, right? They returned to that toxic environment out of that hunger for love and care and safety. This time, however, that option has been removed. They have been cut off from being able to find their way back to the people who were unable to meet their needs. And again, it's important to remember that Mars is a trigger point and that they activate the places and planets that they come in contact with. In this case, Mars is activating the loss and separation of the South Node in Virgo, as well as the hunger and craving for union represented by the North Node in Pisces, who Mars is opposing. Right now, back to Hansel and Gretel, and out in this dark woods, and their only option is to go on since they are cut off from the way back to that undernourished environment. And so they go on. And they wander around in the woods aimlessly until they chance upon an old house deep in the heart of the dark woods. This wasn't any normal cabin, mind you. This was an enchanted cabin made of gingerbread with sugar windows and a roof constructed of cake. And in the cabin lived an ancient witch. And the children ran up to the cabin and being so hungry, and they began feasting on the sugar panes of glass and the shingles made of frosting. Soon the witch heard them, and she came outside and invited the children in for a proper meal. The witch feeds the children actual food and hugs them and kisses them and tucks them into bed. Right? She provides all of the emotional and physical sustenance that they were lacking in their home. She gives them the things that they were hungering for. Early the next morning, before they awoke, the witch got up, went to their beds, and looked at the two of them lying there so peacefully with their full red cheeks. They will be a good mouthful, she mumbles to herself. Then she grabs Hansel with her withered old witch hands and carries him to a little stall where she locks him behind a cage door. Cry as he might, there was no help for him. Then she shook Gretel and cried, "Get up, lazy bones! Fetch water and cook something good for your brother. He is locked outside in the stall and is to be fattened up. And when he is fat, I'm going to eat him." The witch is also starving, by the way, right? Everybody's starving in this story. Now, now Hansel was given the best things to eat every day by Gretel, right? Or Hansel was given the best things to eat every day so that he could be fattened up, but Gretel received nothing but crayfish shells. Now, even though there is access to resources, one part is still cut off from nourishment. And that nourishment is toxic, just as toxic as the starvation was. It isn't the food to support life Hansel is being fed, right? He is being fed so he can be fattened up and consumed. And Gretel, or the archetype of the feminine in this tale, is still denied food and sustenance and made to go hungry. So every morning, the old woman crept out of the stall. The witch crept out to the stall and shouted, "Hansel, stick out your finger so I can feel how fat you are." But Gretel is pretty clever. And even though she has only eaten one crust of bread and crayfish shells for the past 2 weeks, she slips Hansel a chicken bone, which Hansel holds out for the witch to feel when she comes in to check on him. An important side note here, witches have red eyes, apparently, which are not great for seeing, and so the witch is easily tricked by the chicken bone. When 4 weeks has passed, Hansel was still thin, and impatience came over the witch, and she would wait no longer. "Hey, Gretel," she shouted to the girl, "hurry up and fetch some water. Whether Hansel is fat or thin, tomorrow I'm going to slaughter him and boil him." Gretel was understandably upset, but she did what she was told. The next morning, Gretel had to get up early, hang the kettle with water, and make a fire. "First, we are going to bake," the old woman said. "I have already made a fire in the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel outside the oven, from which the fiery flames were leaping. "Climb in," said the witch, "and see if it's hot enough to put the bread in there yet." And when Gretel was inside, she intended to close the oven door, and bake her and eat her up as well. But Gretel saw what she had in mind, so she said, "I don't really know how to do that. I'm just a kid, and I've never checked in on a witch's oven before." "Stupid goose," the old woman cried. "The opening is big enough. See, I myself could get in." And she crawled up and stuck her head into the oven, and then Gretel gave her a shove, causing her to fall in, and then she closed the iron door and secured it with a bar, and the old woman began to howl frightfully. But Gretel ran away, and the godless witch burned up miserably. That's a quote from Grimm. So, in some versions, it is said that the witch was immortal and could not die, but she was transformed into a cloud of black smoke, which escaped through the chimney and dissipated into the sky. And I kind of like this idea that that energy is not destroyed, but it's transformed through this alchemical fire. Gretel releases Hansel from the cage, and they find all of the precious stones and gems around the house that the witch had taken from all the travelers that she had eaten over the many years. They filled their pockets and returned to their home. It is said that their father had not felt one day of happiness since he left his children to die in the woods. But his wife had since died, and he welcomed the children back home with open arms, and the kids shared the riches that they had found in the witch's house, and they all lived happily ever after. So, rounding this up, there are a few quick things that I would like to look at in this tale, right? Again, the main theme of this story is hunger, which is on brand with Rahu, the North Node, right? Who is just like consuming and consuming and never knows that it's full, has no belly, right? So is always experiencing this deep hunger. The archetype of the witch and also the stepmother, who seems pretty witch-like herself, right? And the stepmother overcomes the weak ego of the father, who is pretty inept, right? This may be the survival drive, the hunger, the fear of scarcity, which causes the stepmother to feel like she needs to be in control. And then the woodcutter, right, has this fear of his wife being mad at him or rejecting him, which causes the woodcutter to go along with her macabre plan. These are both forms of hunger, right? The hunger for connection, and then the actual physical hunger, and the fear of death or starvation, right? The hunger for life. And we also have the image of the witch who lives in the center of a dark woods, who is also starving, right? Just waiting for something that will feed her, right? And things that live at the center of dark woods are usually things in our unconscious. She is like an elemental earth spirit who lives in the center of the psyche and is starving, right? And needs to be like met or seen or fed in some way. And when there's too much going on in the unconscious, it can overwhelm us and consume us like the witch. Right? In Pisces, Rahu's hunger pulls us into these unconscious spaces, into our unmet needs, into our cravings, into the longing for connection or unity with something bigger than ourselves. This is also the hunger that leads Hansel and Gretel into the witch's house, and the hunger that the witch embodies as this unconscious force at the center of the dark woods of the psyche, which causes her to constantly be consuming anything that enters into her realm. We also have this image of the parents as the South Node in Virgo, who detach from and abandon the children. The woodcutter is powerless to confront the demands of his wife. The wife is also powerless in the face of starvation, and the parents seek to gather power wherever they can, which ends up being an act of cutting off their children. Right? And this is a really extreme form of the Virgo quality of discernment, right? But they're living in a famine, and desperate times call for desperate measures. And this act of separation, which feels pretty disassociative on the parents' part, right, sends the children on their way to confront this core hunger, which runs through the entire tale, while also helping them let go of a connection that was ultimately pretty toxic. Their parents weren't able to meet their needs for physical or emotional nourishment in any way. And being forced to leave that situation, they were where they were barely able to have enough sustenance to survive. They were forced to confront the deep forces within the psyche. Gretel uses trickery and cleverness to overcome the witch and to transform her into a cloud of smoke. Then the children are granted access to great resource and great riches in the form of these precious stones and gems, which the witch had taken from all of those who had the misfortune of crossing her path over the years. There's an interesting parallel here between the white stones that Hansel uses to mark the path in the beginning of the story, which, as the story says, shone like silver in the moonlight, but they were just ordinary pebbles. And now they have stones of actual value, which provide them with a resource which goes beyond mere survival. And this is the boon that we receive when we enter into the depths and confront the forces that live there. In the context of the tale, and in line with the current astrology, we may be asked to examine the places where we are starving, right? Where we don't have enough, where we are just getting by, and look at the energy of craving that I think lives within all of us. And one of the stories that cravings tells is that what we have is not good enough, or we don't have enough, and that we need something else to make us better or to make it okay. And how can this craving or hunger get us into trouble, right? And what might it be asking us to confront? We may need to look at the places where we are underfed and where our needs are not actually being met, or we are receiving just enough to survive but not to thrive. And we may mistake that for being all right, right? Or we may be afraid that if we step outside of that, then we'll have nothing. We can ask ourselves, what is holding me here in this space of hunger or starvation, right? And what is the trail or the well-worn path that keeps bringing me back here? What might I need to confront in order to break that pattern and to do things differently? And how can I better discern what is actually nourishing for me from just the illusion of substance, right? What might we need to confront and integrate so that we can actually feel fed and like our needs for connection and sustenance are actually being met? And with that, my friends, I will bid you a fond farewell, some food for thought, some hopefully spiritual and intellectual nourishment to take you on your Monday. Thanks for sticking with me and tuning in. Sorry I ran a little bit over today, but I don't know. I hope it was entertaining to somebody out there. Yeah, again, I'm an astrologer, tarot reader, licensed mental health counselor, and God willing, day after tomorrow, I will be officially a licensed mental health counselor after I pass my exam. Thank you all. And I don't know, I'm available for tarot and astrology readings. I do astrological coaching. If you live in the state of New Mexico, I may even be available for counseling or therapy. But we shall see. If you're interested in any of these services or just want to hit me up, you can DM me on Instagram or contact me through my website, campwizardcamp.com. If you want to support this practice, I got a Patreon. You can go to Patreon/Camp Wizard Camp and check me out. I've been sort of like slacking on my Patreon duties because I'm studying for my test and also like trying to have a little bit of fun and a little bit of summer. Oh, thank you for the good luck wishes, everybody. And yeah, pray for me. Send me some good energy tomorrow as I take my test, as I sit for my exam. Anyway, I got a Patreon. It's a great way to support me. I've been totally slacking on my Patreon duties, but trying to have a little bit of a summer and not just work all the time, and also had to study for my test. But hopefully, I'll be back on that game soon, as well as back on my Melee Report game. And the Melee Report is my astrology themed radio show that comes out sometimes weekly when I'm able to do it. So hopefully that'll be happening soon after I get through this initiation. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. If you're interested in the Greece retreat, you can check it out on themysteries.org. And I'll put a link in the show notes and a link in my bio. And that, my friends, is all the astro weather that is fit to print. Thank you so much for tuning in, for lending me your precious attention. That shit is valuable. And I appreciate you tuning in. And yeah, I hope that this was helpful to somebody out there. And I wish you all an excellent week in space. I will see you next time. Same wizard time, same wizard channel. Um, uh, oh yeah. Text me tomorrow, Gina Maria. And yeah. We'll connect. Anyway, I'll see y'all next week. Same wizard time, same wizard channel. Until then, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and as always, may the force be with you. I'll see y'all next time. Bye now.